Welcome to Section 5, Lesson 1 on creating positive habits. We're going to focus on the second half of positive, including thinking differently, including best practices, varying instruction, and finally, enthusiasm. Now, here's a quick activity for us, and you can jot some of these notes down in your workbook. But give me a statement an employee may tell you at the end of your transaction from one of these restaurants. We'll first start with McDonald's. Now, in my experience, thinking about what somebody's told me from McDonald's, I've gotten a lot of random statements, including, get out of here, is there anything else you want? Yeah. Or just not saying anything at all. But what about Chick-fil-A? I think everybody will agree that they say, my pleasure. And this is important because Chick-fil-A has chosen to teach their employees a routine, regardless of what's going on, of being able to say a specific statement. This helps them when they have a rude customer that maybe their order got wrong. There's less of a hostile action or intense exchange because they've learned how to stay in their quote unquote bubble. Well, this really has to deal with thinking differently. And as an educator, we are tasked to think differently as well. And this is why I'm focusing on the power of willpower. Now listen, practice and experience with new routines is the key to a successful habit change. And so we have to think differently. We have to think outside the box when we want a student to try to learn how to do new things. So whether Chris has been spending the majority of his life cussing people out because they've been calling him out of his name or bothering him, we're going to teach him a new routine, and we're going to continue to practice until we start getting some of that automaticity. But willpower is an important part of that process. It's the control of one's impulses or actions, that self-control, right? And so by choosing a certain behavior ahead of time, when that routine comes, when the inflection point comes, they're going to be more successful. So again, this is the reason why I wanted Chris to start learning that new affirmation statement and practice with him over and over again, because that's going to become autopilot when someone comes up again and tells him about himself and he doesn't really want to hear it. What else do we have to consider when we're dealing with students that are difficult? Well, some things we have to learn about or remember is that willpower really is about focus and attention. And a lot of times we forget that in the front part of our brain, which is the frontal lobe, is where our executive functioning skills happen. This includes working memory, so that's keeping information in our mind and using it in short term. We're being able to have that cognitive flexibility, looking at a situation more than one way. And finally, that self-control, being able to ignore distractions and resist temptation. Now, again, some of this stuff is being worked in when you're at Chick-fil-A, but at McDonald's, you're not getting into this, right? It's just fly off at the handle. And so again, when we're in that classroom and we're working with that student, we want to make sure what kind of things are they lacking? And again, we're not definitely asking you to diagnose a student with maybe they have ADHD or whatnot. But if you're seeing that they're not able to retain some of the information that you're teaching to them, we have to get more intense with being able to do that. Now, remember that working memory and distractions are often synonymous when we're talking about trying to change our routines, right? Because there's so much distractions that are around us, especially with the use of our phones. So with working memory, keeping that information and being able to use it, students now are having these cell phones, and even us are having cell phones distract us. So how often, if you're trying to teach a new routine, are you getting a lot of distractions, right? It's important that when you're trying to teach new routines, I would put the phones down, I would put all the technology away so that you can focus specifically on that task, and hopefully that success rate will increase over time. But it's hard for students to remember information that are taught from the previous day. Right? And here's some statistics for us to kind of help us to even better understand it. 48% of people said that they couldn't bear to live without their smartphones. Can you believe that? That's almost half of Americans. Or even 80% of teens check their phones every hour, right? So think about that. When you're working with a student trying to change that routine, well, that's become a routine for them, right? Let's say 5 or 6 years ago when they didn't have a phone, now they're checking it every hour. So these things in our routines, we have to make sure if we want to be successful with changing routines, limit the distractions, and if there's things that are in our working memory that are not working right, we want to make sure that we just spend more time and more practice changing them so that our success rate again will be able to be more increased.